Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can see a little link down below and you can jump into Zoom. Once in Zoom, you can hit the little link down below and jump into Makana. And that's really where you become a producer of the show. You're really deciding what we talk about with your questions and with your votes. It is really important that you actually vote. We spend a little bit more time on the front half of the questions. By the end, we're just trying to get through them. So your voting makes a big difference in what actually gets covered and how long we spend covering it. So make sure to jump into Makana, vote your questions up and down, and we'll move forward with that. If you think that you can answer some of these questions, we'd love to have you. It's really a whole different experience here on the panel, and you're going to find that a lot of you start jumping further into the community, becoming more part of the community as you jump onto the panel. So if you feel like you have answers, this panel keeps on getting bigger and better based on all the different life experiences that each person brings from production. It doesn't mean that you have to know all the answers. In fact, if you want one a week, it's still worth being on the panel, and something that you can add to the conversation. You can come in as early as 6 just to check out your system and see if it's ready to go. But you need to be here by 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to make sure you're here for mic checks. First hour is always 7 days a week, general discussion, just about things that you're interested in related to virtual production and media production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to talk about the Apple keynote from last week. We all kind of watched it live and talked about it, but we're going to break it down, maybe look at a couple frames and talk about what we liked and didn't like about the keynote. We're also, Tuesday, tomorrow, we're going to talk about sound in Mad in the Kitchen. It's complicated. There's multiple Zoom rooms, there's comms, there's talkback, there's all these other things. So we're going to talk a little bit about how all of that works and answer your questions about that. I think it's kind of an interesting process. Felipe Baez and Stephen Moyer will be here on Wednesday to talk about basically how they're building or how they built the logistics for an HBO show, the kind of the back end of that and how it got put together. So that's going to be really interesting. I would highly recommend being here on Wednesday to talk to them. Thursday, we're supposed to do this last week, and I had swapped something at the last minute, but we're going to talk about working with talent, really. We're going to talk about working with talent. So this will be this Thursday, so hopefully you'll join us for that. And Friday, Andy Carluccio is back. He's going to talk about Streamweaver. Streamweaver is the other app that Liminal makes, and so he's going to talk about how that actually works. It's pretty cool. So it should be a great week. Saturday, of course, is the long day. Saturday has become the long day. We start early and go late. Education, of course, is the second hour. And then Nick Jeshishin from Drexel University will be leading the conversation along with Rick Markley, talking about Unreal Engine. We talked a lot about metahumans on the last one. We'll be talking about a lot of new things as they come out. It's really going to become more of a general discussion about Unreal. At noon, we're going to start doing the Mad in the Kitchen test, what I'm kind of calling the Mad Test Kitchen. But then we're going to do a test kitchen for week 5. So we're in week 3 right now. We're all going to get together and just over Zoom go through the recipe for week 5. This is allowing us to kind of test it, see how it's working, see what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. It's not a show. It's literally all of us getting together. You can put up cameras if you want. But you can also just kind of cook along and we'll talk about, oh, that didn't make sense to me, or I really wish I had known this. We're finding that the kind of recipe you have to write for a show where people are actually cooking along is different than the kind of recipe you have in a book. And so we're looking at how do we really define that more effectively. So we'll be doing that at noon to 2, and then we're going to shift gears and actually do the show. So it makes it a little easier for those of us who are setting up to set up once and be able to do both of those at the same time. So it does mean there's a little kitchen cleaning that goes on in the middle. So anyway, so that'll be the test kitchen from noon to 2, and then the actual show. I will say we're going to open up the show at 3, where you can listen to us start talking. But we're not really, it's not officially starting until 5. So it's kind of runs there. And then remember that after Mad in the Kitchen, we all get together and talk about the production, what worked, what didn't work, what we're going to change, what we should change. And it's not really us just telling you how we did it. It's us listening to you as the audience and having you define how we, what coming up with how the show goes. This is, again, unlike any show I know of. This is an interesting process. So stay tuned to that. I am noting that we had some kind of connection timeout, so this open may not have been seen by YouTube, but all of you saw it here. We're going to try it, launch it again. I'm looking back now, and it failed. So I've been trying. We'll see what happens here. It still says that it's live, so we're not really sure exactly whether it's restarting and respawning a new one or not. Zoom seems to be having some kind of problem getting to YouTube today. You see it now, Jeffrey?
Yeah, I'm watching it right now.
And was it showing before, or is it just popping up now?
It's I don't know. It's just going. It's right at the start. I don't see any skips or anything like that.
And people are probably watching us attempt to relink to it. So in the back end of Zoom, it's not showing that it's linking correctly. So obviously something has been pushed over the weekend that doesn't work. Anyway, so we'll take a look at that later. Bill, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Jeffrey, keep an eye on it, and you go ahead and interrupt if we're having some kind of problem with the stream. Go ahead, Bill.
Good morning from California, from me, from one and all. And Ken Jordan here says from Surrey, UK, I'm looking for a buy once, cry once solution for discrete in-ear monitors for use on Zoom. And he has a note here, he already owns a number of in-ears, so I guess that analogy doesn't work for me.
Go ahead, Jason.
These are the Shure SE846s, and I think they're absolutely fantastic. I think they retail $800-900, something like that. And oh boy, you do cry once, but they sound fantastic. They are a bit overkill for Zoom, but if you're doing monitoring, they're great.
Mickey, and then Guy, and then Nigel.
Yeah, if you want something that's really discreet, but only really good enough for communication purposes, look at the Bumblebee Industries, Sidekick. Which is exactly the same thing as the in-ears. But if you want something that is good enough for critical listening, though it is not nearly as discreet, look at the in-ears by JH Audio. JH Audio, Jerry Harvey, the same guy who founded Ultimate Ears. They have options from $500 all the way up to $5,000. So buy once, cry once.
You cry a lot. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing as Mickey. I have the Bumblebee, and this is what they look like. I mean, they're in there.
Yeah,
they're super tiny. And then I'm personally using right now, because it's super fast to put these ones in. This is the set that comes with a set of Sennheiser Evolution 500 series for IEM. So this is really for music for like drummers and vocalists, but it's the IE40 Pros from Sennheiser, and they're about $99.
Yep. Nigel, and then Bill.
Yeah, assuming the Bumblebee and the in-ear are the same. The in-ear are a lot cheaper. They got shipped a lot faster. Bumblebee or whatever they were wanted like 2 or 3 weeks, didn't know. These came the next week. But they don't have all the pack of ears, or the ears things. You have to buy those separately.
Go ahead, Bill.
I use the in-ears as well. I think that's perfect for when I want clarity, but I don't care about low end. I would never use them for music, but I always use them for speech.
There we go. Next question.
Moving on to Ken Jordan of Surrey in the UK, and Ken asks, this is his second question this morning, does the MixPre or any other device on the Zoom audio chain have a setting that stops dangerously high audio spikes from being transmitted to the headphone port?
Go ahead, Mickey.
All products by sound devices that have headphone outputs have a limiter on the headphone amplifier. So that would save you. But do know that those can drive really high impedance headphones. Those headphone preamps can drive high impedance headphones. So it has that dynamic range to really hit hard before slamming the limiter.
Next question. Oh, go ahead, Bill, real quick.
Well, I was just going to say really quickly, in the old days in radio, we used to call that brick wall limiting. That is nothing beyond this level goes out, period, end of story.
Next question.
Gabriel Ung of Malaysia says, for on-site events, what items do you keep connected with in flight cases to save load-in time or your workstations, to keep your workstations neat? What's the secret sauce of cable management to quicker on-site patching and having to deal with a huge snake pit of cables between racks and the work table? And he notes sometimes having to deal with long HDMI runs from the ATEM minis and monitors, USB cables from keyboard, mouse, and power cables. He's just got a nest of cables.
I mean, I think that one of the things that we try to do is group up what we need. So areas that are going to be heavily connected, we do try to put them into racks. One of the things we've used a lot is there is a kind of ecto whatever, I can't think of the name of it right now, from SKB, that is the shock mounts that they had, but then they just put them into cases and they just come out and they're totally exposed, but they're all pre-wired. So we're able to pre-wire as much. You want to look at groups of things that you're going to wire, and then we put them into sections in our flight cases, and then we pull them out and set them down. It's kind of hard if we're trucking, we can use big roll-in cases, but for flight cases, we use these SKB ones that are basically a ecto, just the skeleton of their shock mounts, but you can pull them out and stack them up, and then we'll attach them to each other. They don't attach on their own. We build little cables for them and pull them together. That is the main thing that we think about, is how do we minimize the number of cables. The second thing that we do is that we mark them all. So we use a lot of, if we're using SDI, we use a lot of the Neutrik rear twist connectors with all the colors, so that we can kind of choose, it makes it very easy for us to kind of identify what we have to put together. Make sure to use convenience panels on the back, because it'll keep you from constantly connecting to your actual hardware. When the hardware connection breaks, it's expensive. When the convenience panel breaks, not so expensive. So, and then we really think about those lengths. Finally, you can build snakes. You can have snakes made, but you can also build them with netting. So we use a lot of I can't think of it, but it's like a netting that you put around and you keep them, wrapped up so that they're a little cleaner as you go from one place to the other. Laying them out, I do an OmniGraffle and other things, but laying out where everything's going to be and figuring out actual cable runs is pretty useful. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, exactly. Like having a good selection of different lengths, and only use the length that you need for that specific run, will allow you to keep your workplace a lot neater. And also, cables that are well wrapped and velcroed allow you to much more easily and quickly deploy them on site.
Yeah, and one of the things to keep in mind is this is where a cable case goes in really usefully. Like having you have all the cables you think you need, and then you have a cable case of just lots of options, so that you're not just grabbing the last cable that you had. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, these have saved my bacon many a time. This is just a rack SDI, and
there's an example of the convenience cam.
Yeah, it's got, each one is isolated, and that's important. The cheap ones do not actually isolate the ground, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, Bill, real quick.
I wonder if the people don't understand the convenience panel is just a shorty cable from the back of the device to that panel on the back of a rack, so that it never becomes detached from the basic equipment.
Right. You have it all pre-built and pre-wired, and they're set out in a way that you can actually see them, and that if someone steps on a cable or something runs through it and pulls it, it'll rip that out without touching the case itself. Go ahead, Aaron.
Another thing for really long cables, you can use reels, which helps kind of control the length of the cable. If you don't have,
for us,
like a 1,000-foot run of something, then you
1,000 feet runs, we might use them pretty much. Yep. And we use reels for fiber a lot, to your point, where we can pick them up and roll them out.
Alex, what's your cutoff for fiber? Like, at what point do you say it's got to be fiber?
Well, for me, it's 150 feet. As soon as I get to 150 feet, I switch to fiber. I don't run signals longer than that on copper. I know a lot of people that do, but I don't. No. Next question.
Keenan Campbell of Princeton, Illinois is in with, for us non-audiophiles, can you talk about the differences between balanced and unbalanced connections, since you can adapt pretty much anything, but should you?
I don't know. You go ahead, Mickey.
The biggest advantage in most situations with going to balanced connections is that it eliminates a lot of electric interference in the connection. There are other advantages, but that is the biggest one.
Go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say the same thing. An actual balanced signal actively cancels noise that might have been picked up by the wire as an antenna over the course of a long run. So it is a quieter way to pass signals from one point to another.
I mean, essentially what happens is that you have a signal. I'm going to really simplify this, but you have a signal going into the cable, and you invert it. And so you have two that are running. They're basically the opposite of each other, running through the same, picking up all the same noise. When you invert it back, one of that signal that you inverted the first time, the only difference in those signals, basically the noise goes two different directions. And so that noise basically, cancels itself out. So it's a very old way of doing it. There's no digital part of it, and it's very, very effective at removing that. We don't run unbalanced more than a couple inches typically, because and I I don't like to run analog for more than 10 feet, but I don't like to run unbalanced for very far because it'll pick up everything around it, like the power going into your laptop. Courtney, and then Jason.
And another thing to look for, even in balanced cables, is twisted pair, because if those internal conductors are running next to each other, they can crosstalk from one into another, especially if you have a line level signal traveling along the same cable as a microphone level signal, so that each audio pair of the balanced side is individually twisted. And then sometimes those are twisted around, and Canary makes a cable car called Star Quad, where the same signal travels over a separate twisted pair for each leg of the audio.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jason. You were just showing that. Yep. That's
yeah. Plus
there.
one on the Star Quad. So, basically tip ring sleeve, this is a 1/4 inch, but this is hot at the very top. I think the inverse of that is the ring, which is in the middle, and then the sleeve is the ground. That's what balanced means.
Next question.
Moving on to Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas. And he says, can anyone remind me what causes NDI Hulk mode? It seems to happen for me when using NDI virtual inputs into Zoom. Then when I become active speaker and start sending higher resolution, or when I switch sources somewhere in my pipeline, it just happens momentarily.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I believe it's happening with the handshake. Between Zoom, when you hit the 1080p, I think it's looking for RGB or YUV, and it can't understand for some reason the difference, and so it mismatches, and all you have to do is just turn it off and turn it back on, and it's just that initial hit. It's like the EDID, something's getting confused in there. So I just got sick of it happening, and so I just turned on external video on Vmix and quit using NDI for my feed into Zoom, and that cured it. The downside is now I got a little bit of a CPU hit sending out my external video. So I don't know if Rupert's using Vmix, but that's the way to fix it.
And we see a different version of that with the ATEM, where it does exactly the same thing when it pops up, and suddenly it doesn't want to show, it just shows gray. And so the same thing, you restart it and it's fine. There's some kind of handshake that Zoom's having trouble with both NDI and with the ATEM minis that shows up every once in a while. Go ahead, David.
Chris Fenwick had something the other day where it was vision mode, where it went red and orange instead of green, and the green behind me is not Hulk mode. So, but I'm just curious if that was a similar thing, or was it just a hard restart?
No, I don't use NDI by and large. What was happening on my system was the communication of the ATEM to its external monitor just got wonky, and I had asked what it was, and there were some ideas. And then a question came up about, how often do you turn it off? I went, let me turn it off. Boop, boop, recycled the power, and the multi-view fixed itself immediately.
Next question.
Moving on, Doug Ferguson in Fort Wayne, Indiana is in with, for Mad in the Kitchen show, why did the countdown not go all the way down to 0?
I think that's just two different philosophies. By not having to go all the way to 0, if you're not ready for an accurate start, then that's a good idea. So I think Alex had it put in that way. I'm not talking to myself as a third person. Alex Kolner had it put in that way so that we have a little bit of room to work. The hard part is that we use it as a coordination tool so that people can actually see what's going on. And so we're going to have it put back in. It was the first, I saw it on the first one and forgot to say it. And then of course, in the notes while I was talking, I said, remind me to request to have that go all the way to 0. And so it's now all the way to 0. So in online events, those countdown clocks are really useful because they sync up everybody on the far end of knowing when they're going to go live. If you can make sure that you're going live at that time. So that's what we had there. So you'll see it go all the way to 0 in the future. Next question.
Gabriel Ong of Malaysia says, how do some virtual events get a huge wall of Zoom participants as a backdrop? It doesn't look like a direct output from Zoom. The black borders are thinner and there is no Zoom UI to be seen. I think this was achieved before the recent launch of the Vmix OBS NDI plugin.
I think that most of them actually still are coming out of Zoom, though I think that some people are starting to take advantage of things like Zoom OSC kind of have more design and more control over what they're doing. And then some people are mapping all these individual panes onto Unreal, onto polygons, and then they can have complete control over them. So some of the stuff you'll see, like with Tony Robbins, I think those are all being mapped in a different way than what you normally see. Go ahead, John.
+1 on the Unreal. I'll see lots and lots of people pumping it into Unreal and then out. And the other one I've seen recently is a guy pumping it into Resolume Arena.
And once you, basically what you're doing is you're taking this grid and just grabbing this little area, this pixel area, and putting it onto a polygon. Once you do that, you can scale them up and down and move them around, and even have them fly in and out. It's pretty useful. Next question.
Moving on to Matt Woods of Newcastle upon Tyne. And Matt says, any preferred methods for screen scraping meetings and online classes using Screenflow, but seems to be quite CPU heavy?
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, screen scraping, it depends on what it's for, really. If you are screen scraping, a very long record, then a dedicated recording deck is the only way to escape, some serious CPU hit. If you're doing it live in Zoom, then again, dedicated computer will not kill you. You just enter with a second account. So I guess it depends.
For anything that matters to me, I never, ever, ever record on the same computer that I have the video coming in on. It's just asking the computer to do a lot of things, and literally it can check its email and you'll start losing frames. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, traditionally I would use like an Atomus Ninja hooked up over HDMI, but now these days I'm using a second computer, which is beelink by Courtney, to send it over NDI and do a screen capture that way. So it's NDI screen capture, and then the other one is NDI. So you got to put it on the host machine. Actually, I use Vmix desktop capture, which it still sends out NDI, and then I pick it up with screen monitor and hit record over there.
Go ahead, Bill, and then Courtney, real quick.
I have high-speed internet, and just a standard QuickTime Pro screen capture has been looking really good on surprising number of social media services. So it's simple, works though.
Go ahead, Courtney.
If you're not planning on doing a lot of extensive editing and you're cheap like me, you can get these digitizing units that take HDMI or even composite and component input and have HDMI through on it. And they will record H.264 onto a USB stick in about a 10 gigabit per second bit rate. And as long as you're not, they look, the quality looks pretty good, very good. It's hardware encoded and doesn't involve a computer. It's completely standalone. So,
and my very old fashioned solution is a Pix 240 that I still have that I plug into and go through it. It's still the easiest and best one. I got big buttons I can push. Next question.
Tommy Chance is in St. Paul, Minnesota. He says, how do you extract individual audio from Zoom meetings for mixing? How many feeds can you get off each computer? And do you need multiple Zoom IDs? I'm looking for 12 feeds for starters.
I think you can record I believe it's to record a drive. You can pick off the ISOs. Is that correct? The reason I don't know is because when we need ISOs, we record on one output per computer. And so mine's a very manual way to do it. Or instance. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, the recording that you record locally, you can extract individual audios. If you do a cloud recording, those, you don't have that option. And then, yeah, Alex's expensive solution is get 10 Zoom rooms, and just put each person in and then send them back a return. That's all you have to do. It's like,
we started with, well, the thing is that now that we're starting to be more successful with the beelinks, it becomes a relatively inexpensive thing to do, to have a bunch of machines, that are all outputting them. So by Courtney. All right, next question.
Lassie Gravdal of Oslo, Norway is up next with, is there any way to control Microsoft Teams via Companion on the StreamDeck, mute, cam off, and so forth, without emulating shortcut keys? And he notes he's a Mac user.
Not that I know of. I don't think that they've built the kind of the deeper connection into Teams that we see with Zoom. Anybody have? No, we're stumped. Sorry. Next question.
Tim McCullough in Wichita, Kansas says, what became of Monday night office hours? Just saw this morning's email.
It's too much. So it's a lot to, I finally reached a point where I have to admit that Monday and Wednesday were the first ones that I mean, because me getting up early and doing these with everybody is effortless. Like I just get up, it's my thing. I enjoy it. I hang out with everybody. The hard part is I usually have things I need to get done, and I still hang out between 5 and 7 anyway. And Mondays and Wednesdays were not effortless for me to do. And so I was just like, oh, what am I doing? And if Monday had gotten bigger, so if it had gone over, if it had been able to handle over 100, concurrent for very long, I probably would have kept it as let's see how it goes. But it didn't reach what I consider critical mass. And so it was an experiment. We may come back to it, but we need to be a little bit more mature before we do that. It just it never turned the corner. So it was actually the number where it was going down. And again, it was hard for me, and it conflicts with my martial arts. So it's a day I can't go. So anyway, that's also part of the problem. All right, next question.
Chris Roysden of Round Rock, Texas, I believe. We record a lot of product demos, and one of our clothing options is a branded T-shirt. Is there a better way to secure a lav mic other than clipping at the collar or pinching the shirt? Taping under the shirt isn't really an option, especially with our female engineers.
Yeah, go ahead, Craig.
Years ago, Sennheiser, when they shipped the MK2s, had a little magnet that went behind your shirt and a clip on it. I think there's still a bunch of options like that out there.
Yep. Go ahead, Bill, and then JJ.
There's a ton of different kinds of mounting things. Clips called vampire clips just put a couple of very small pins through a shirt or something like that. There's also numerous processes for using gaffer's tape or something, including and moleskin on actual flesh to hide a mic capsule that would be on your skin and never touch the shirt. T-shirts are problematic because anything you put on them tends to wrinkle them a little bit. So that's what I do.
Yep. Go ahead, JJ.
Yep, moleskin.
Mickey?
Yeah, on top of moleskin, there are a lot of solutions also offered, like the ones from companies like Brightcoat and like Ursa, that are little adhesives that sandwich between a piece of what do you call this, foam or fur, that allow you to get rid of a lot of rustle when you need to conceal the mic underneath the clothing.
Yeah, go ahead, David. You were showing that's one version of that.
Yeah, that's actually the Rycoat product.
Okay. So yeah, there you go. Yeah. Oh, we just got a full screen there.
Sorry. And there we go. They're kind of these little flesh-colored moleskin-like tape things. You just hear.
It is amazing the number of options that you have to mount a mic to somebody. When you start digging into it, it becomes something that's pretty interesting. One of the other things to think about is also look at Opera as an option. You can start thinking about, rather than coming in, through a shirt, you can come in through the hair. It takes a little bit more of a setup, but you can. I mean, if you watch Opera, you'll see people putting things in odd places. We've also run Countryman right up into the inside of glasses, which got a remarkably good response. Guy showing this is a
Ursa chest strap.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of put all these things together. The problem with the chest straps, if they're T-shirts, is that you'll see them. Like, you'll see the lines from them typically. So, but we've used those a lot when someone's wearing more formal wear. It's worked out pretty well. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, for thinner clothing, you could also use toupee tape, like a top stick, and that sticks extremely well, and the adhesive is very thin.
Next question.
Matt Cool of Montreal, Quebec, Canada, says, on a recent Facebook Live event, the host accidentally showed his home address at about 20 minutes into the show. The client doesn't want to lose all the chat data, so re-uploading isn't an option. Is there any way to edit out that section or cover the address?
Go ahead, Aaron.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we can move on. No, you can't. They won't let you edit anything in the center because people could like it and everything else, and then you could change the meaning of it or change the entire video and cause all kinds of problems. And that's why you can't edit your Twitter and so on and so forth. And so you can head and tail things, but once it's in the middle, you're going to have to download it and upload it again. Next question.
Nigel DeSalle of Austin, Texas, says Blackmagic Camera 7.3 update is out. Anyone played with it yet?
Jason?
Looking forward to it after the show. It dropped very late last night. At least that's when I saw it. So, no, not yet, but pretty soon.
Do we see any highlights? Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, so I know by tonight there's going to be some people in the city doing a lot of tests going on. So I'm expecting by tomorrow we'll know some stuff. For me, the highlights are going to be the Gen 5 for the color signs. I'm wondering what they changed in the difference from Gen 4 to Gen 5. That's going to be a big one. And also for Blackmagic Raw 2.0, I wonder what compression and have they fixed some of the issues that they had in the past.
Right. Yeah. So it'll be interesting. So we'll talk about that more soon. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer of Viera, Florida says, TriCaster versus Vmix for location-independent production. Which do you prefer? And are there any other similar systems to consider?
I would highly recommend Vmix over TriCasters if you can get the machines. I think that Vmix is more flexible. You're able to put it on your own hardware and possibly make that hardware a lot beefier. We've, as recently as last week, had trouble with TriCasters. so it's like, it's not like, oh, it used to be bad. It's still bad. And so go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, we use our TriCaster primarily in Vmix as a backup, but both systems are gonna fail. I mean, I've had them both fail. Like it is, and it's why hardware is like
hardware is much more limited.
In my world.
I don't
know.
I mean, the challenge really is that hardware is a lot more limited. Building things that would be very simple in software become very complicated in hardware. The big advantage of hardware is that it just does the thing. It does what you ask it to do once it starts going. But you're right. I think that Vmix, especially when you start thinking about transitioning into the cloud, doing other things like that, it's going to give you a lot more. I think a lot more scalability. Memo Live on the Mac is probably the Mac version of that. I don't think that. And I know a lot of people, and some people here are still using Wirecast, but I felt like they haven't really kept up. I mean, I think that the two leaders in software are Vmix and in this affordable software. I mean, you can get into higher end things like Vector and, other things that are very expensive, that are at a different level of what we're doing. But when we're talking about average folks doing software switching, I feel like the three leaders are Memo Live on the Mac, Vmix, and TriCaster are those. And if I was going to pick one on the PC, I would definitely pick Vmix. Next question.
Comes from Keenan Campbell in Princeton, Illinois. Again, now that I have a digital mixer, thanks office hours, I was considering desktop XLR gooseneck mics with mute buttons for my emergency operations center. What is the panel's recommendation on these mics? I'd need 12 to 16 of them for the room.
Go ahead, Jason.
Sennheiser makes a pretty decent one of these. As far as the mute button is concerned, I don't know. I think really the difference is I think they only sell one base, and then the rest of the goosenecks are really, what varies between the cheap and the expensive.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, you might want to consider going with a conference system. They're ones by Shure, and also like on the more industrial side of things, I believe Bosch also makes them, and also companies like NEC.
We've had an enormous amount of success with the Shure Microflexes. They're Dante. They are super flexible. You can change mics. They're easy to administer. They have talkback if you use belt packs, they actually have 2 channels of IFB that can be routed to any of the number of the belt packs. They're, as far as the conferencing system, we used them in a lot of things and they've been really successful. Go ahead, Bill.
Shure and Samson both have, but I was surprised to find that Pile, our old friends Piles, have a desktop gooseneck microphone. I've never tried them.
I think knowing Keenan's level of production, I think the one that I would probably look at closely is the Shure Microflexes. Go ahead, John.
For our community access channel, we're doing city council chamber rooms, and the Shures are painless, and they have mixers that combine them all together and give you some other things to make things sound even better.
And we route them all into Dante back to whether it's a Yamaha or X32 or whatever. The only thing you have to worry about is that you have enough channels right now. The only thing to think about is they are using a platform that has effectively 32 to 38 channels. And so you can start to get that. And if you're near Plantronics, or a lot of people that use Plantronics headsets, know that they're both on the same platform. So that's an important thing to, because they'll figure it out. They'll work their way out in the transmission, but you'll have to go into a compressed mode to get more channels out of it. And you can go into compressed mode and get into the 50, 60 channels, but it won't sound as good. Go ahead, Mickey.
And yeah, for the conference systems like the Shure one that Alex is talking about, within the room you can feed out an automated mix that is done by the processor itself. But if you want to broadcast, you can feed a raw Dante output of each microphone source and do a proper mix for those.
And again, you have in the control panel for the Microflex, you see you have a meter for everyone. You can mute, unmute them, change you completely control the remote end. It's really cool. Next question.
Abe in San Diego says, last week I asked about setting up a webcam 50 feet away from the computer using a Logitech C920 and an iMac. But when I connect to the iMac or the Mac Mini for Zoom, it flickers. I ended up using an old PC and it works fine. Is there a reason that this won't work on Macs?
I think it's just a matter of error correction and a long cable. And the Mac might just be less, for whatever reason, the PC and the Mac Mac's being more particular about the signal it's getting, and the PC somehow working its way through it. But at that length of a USB cable, you're going to have all kinds of errata. I would rather figure out a way that I can remote control a small PC like a beelink or something like that is 8 feet away or 6 feet away, and then find a way to send it back, as opposed to extending USB 50 feet is nuts. I'm just going to say, like, it's nuts. And you can do it if you put, like, you powered USB to Cat 5 or Cat 6 or whatever extenders, but taking the actual USB signal, you are way out of its design spectrum. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then Jason.
Yeah, you have the two problems. The first problem is the data transmission rate, and the second problem is the power that the webcam needs to supply that. And there's sensors in the Mac that'll say, if this device is acting funny power-wise, it'll shut it down.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, plus one to that. It basically has to do with the way that macOS integrates something that is as instrumental. For example, your white MacBooks have had webcams on even the cheapest laptops. PCs did not add them until much, much later. So I think it's a handshake issue, and you really shouldn't do that.
And the thing is that it may work for some people and it may work in some places, but it won't work all the time. And it'll just be one of these things that if you can set it and forget it, and oh my gosh, it works, and don't change anything, you might be able to get away with it. But otherwise, this is going to be a constant problem. I would find a better solution. Next question.
Alan Snyder of Cedar Rapids says, what job or career do the panelists do? I'm at a point where I have to make a career change and have looked at video creation or editing, YouTube or other. Any advice on how to get started on this or what it entails? I try to tag this appropriately, but only the tags available are Apple event.
That's good. You don't need to. It's just a general question. Go ahead, Jason.
12 years ago, I started a company instead of getting a job. I think it is both the most rewarding and the scariest thing you'll ever do. So, suffice it to say, go for it. And at the same time, just don't be afraid.
Yep. Go ahead, Bill, and then Charles.
Somebody once told me when I was younger, you are or will become whatever you do most in your life, period, end of story. If you spend all the day shoveling coal, you will become a coal shoveler over the course of time. You have to go where you want to go, or you will get where life takes you.
Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, so aside from color, I started off in post-production as far as like visual effects and compositing, things like that. I'm constantly evolving and learning new things. Aside from the stuff that you guys see me doing here, I have like patents that I'm working on and things that deal nothing with video, and it's just because I have an interest in it. So what I do is I make sure that my main job is paying all my bills, doing some saving, doing that, and then my extra time I put into things that I have interest in. Right. And that then to build over time, and you never know the correlation between the thing that you're doing now and the thing that you're interested in. If you find a parallel between the two that is unique to you, you might be able to bring something to the market that nobody else can.
Right. And I think of it as a tank track. I've talked about it a little bit earlier, where there's the thing that I'm doing that's making most of the money. There's thing on the far end that used to be the thing that I was doing that makes all the money, but there's only 20-30% of it that's coming in from that, and I'm trying to push it out the door. And then the thing I'm trying to get to, and usually the thing that I'm trying to get to, you know that I'm trying to get to it because I'm doing it for free. so it's I don't want to be, I'd often say that free is the straw that drank 1,000 milkshakes. And so you're trying to figure something out. I don't know how to do that yet. So that's how I got into visual effects. That's how I got into video editing. That's how I got into radio. That's how I got into games. That's how I got, like all the things that I've done in my whole life. I started by doing it for free and finding ways to, just do it for anybody that's willing to have me do it for them. And then I calculate, I use that flexibility because no one's up, everyone you're just doing somebody a favor and everything's fine, but it allows me to sit there and culminate over it. And sometimes it can last for years that I did that. And then it locks in, and then that becomes the thing that I'm doing. But then every time, what's notorious for me is that every time that thing locks in, and that's what I'm doing now, I'm looking down the path. I start doing other things for free over here that just start to build up that pressure, and then they'll pop over, and that other one pops out as something that still affects everything else that I'm doing. Everything's been on the road that I'm trying to get to, but that's kind of how I approach that. Sky, and then Courtney.
The difference between being self-employed and unemployed. If you're self-employed, you don't have a job tomorrow.
Yeah,
unemployed means you're looking for somebody else to give you a job. So it's again a lot of it's attitude.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I always had the mantra is find something that you love doing so much that you do it for free, or pay somebody to let you do it, and then make that your career.
Yep, absolutely. Nigel, and then Guy.
Yeah, I think in the modern world, fee follows free.
Right. Yep. Guy.
Yeah, I was a Final Cut trainer and teaching people digital video, and started this little store 18 years ago. And now this thing of cloud and just seeing where, and thanks to Jeff Keithley, he's the one that really opened my eyes as to what's possible. I think that's where the trend is going. So if it's a passion for you, I would try creating beautiful things up in the cloud with AWS, learning all that you can. Jim Hankins, he's already got a bunch of the certifications. He would be a good guy to reach out to and discuss. And it's the future.
And the biggest thing is to start doing it. I think a lot of people will sit there and try to figure it out. Use your phone, use whatever, look at what you want to do and do it. You will not be able to figure out how to do that until you've done it. And then this is what this resource is for. So Office Hours is here for you to go out there, get cuts and bruises and come back and ask questions, and so, and that's what you should be doing every day. Is I'd love to see questions from you every single day. If I can't figure this out, I can't figure this out. I can't figure this out. I can't figure this out. And we'll figure it out. We'll help, we'll all figure it out together. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah. Fake it till you make it is a real thing. You just say, I want to do that. And you go do it. And you figure it out. And this is how my career works too. I mean, Alex was saying it earlier, but it's the same thing,
And go to, find ways that are
the best way to do it.
Yeah. I often think about, you want to help the people that are, if there's someone that's doing more than you, figure out a way that you can help them any way you can, because you're going to make friends with someone that's going to spread the water a little bit in front of you. And they're also you're going to learn a lot from them by being next to them. Help your peers, because that's going to be, they're the people that you're going to do this with, and help the people behind you. If you figured something out, you help the people behind you, because, they're your next peers and the next leaders that are in front of you. So, you just kind of constantly help everyone around you. And then just ignore the problem children. Don't do anything about it. You don't have to get into make it drama. Just let them go, move on, and just pay attention to the ones that are helping you move forward and that you can help move forward. Next question.
Jim Barnes of Kansas City says, any recommendations for a virtual award show to add excitement when the winners are announced? Some presenters are in the studio. Everyone else is virtual.
Go ahead, Jason.
I'd say go to Motion VFX and, create some play out graphics, some interstitials, some transitions, some lower thirds, and don't skimp on the audio. I think that's the right way to do it. Anyone else?
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, last night watching the Oscars, the moment the winner was announced, the music rolled in, the energy came up, the applause happened. That was all by plan. Look at the audio crafting of that show and how much it affected the energy of the overall presentation.
We did a prototype that we haven't used yet, but it's something that we got to the point where it was working, which is that we had sound effects of people clapping, and the more you hit emojis, specifically the heart button in Facebook, the louder it would get, and it would pull in more things. So it had a thing. So it caused a little bit of RSI, because then you're sitting there tapping your phone. Everyone's tapping their phone and doing this thing, and it made the thing go up and down. But it gave people a feeling like they were actually interacting with it, and they were. Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, I just wanted to double down on the don't skimp out on the audio. There's the thing we've probably all seen where they have the same kind of a video with two different audio tracks on them, and then how it completely changes the emotional impact of that scene. So it's really powerful what can be done, and in an award show you could do some really big transitions with that.
Picking up speed, we're going to start answering pretty quickly. Next question.
Ronnie Hofsey of Tromsø, Norway says, any experience using Apple Remote Desktop for Big Sur in a multi-Mac Mini environment to manage Zoom or Skype or Teams? What other multi-machine management has been tested?
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I've tested that extensively, and I've yet to have any issue with the M1 Macs. I think they're solid in that way. Just turn off Wi-Fi.
We've been using them a ton that way, where we send them out to a remote. Now, what we could do probably is have them log into their own VPN, but we've had a little bit of issue with that in the past, not with the M1s, just in general. So we send them out with a box. Right now we're sending Meraki Z3 out with them. But you could probably put a Raspberry Pi in and do the same thing, so that they just log in. But we have had zero issue. We're basically using that to run via Bluetooth. We'll run a Blackmagic 6K, and through Wingman run the USB-Pre or the MixPre 3 from that Mac inside of this little brain that we send out with what we're doing, and all of that has worked, knock on wood, seamlessly so far. So that's worked really well. But Apple Remote Desktop has been super stable, and I go into my computer at the office all the time from here. Next question.
Tobias Moss in Minneapolis, Minnesota says, what are the panel's thoughts on ProPresenter? What are its limitations? Do you recommend another system for simultaneously pushing graphics and overlays with different formatting for Zoom and in-room screens?
ProPresenter is great. I mean, it has technically it's super solid, and it works really well. It was built for churches, and for us, it just has a lot more things that we don't need for our broadcasts in the interface. And so, we've been a little less interested in that one, only because it just has more things that we have to kind of work around. But it will absolutely do all the things that you need it to do. Go ahead, Jason.
If you're familiar with conventional playout decks and the way that if this makes any sense, the way that broadcast and NLE typically works, ProPresenter is a little bit weird. That said, if you're not familiar with stuff, you're not having to work behind yourself, it works really well.
And I believe that you can build, specific pipes with all of these, where, through Mimo Live will support multiple monitors with different things that are coming out of them. So that's another option. And things like QLab, you can do a lot of things to a lot of different monitors that are all being queued up from a singular location. So those are other things to think about. I believe Resolume would be another one that might work, but I haven't done it in that respect. Next question.
Alvis Laskins from Riga, Latvia, comes in next with, is Marantz's Pod Pack 1 microphone okay for office hours? And he's got a link there.
Go ahead, Mickey.
I don't usually think of microphones when I think of the company Marantz, but I've been pleasantly surprised by the quality of Leo Mendel's microphone, which is a Marantz. So, let's try it, and we'll let us know.
We should make a list. I'm open to buying a couple of these just to test them, and I just have to. We just have to figure out which ones we want to test as far as more basic ones. So we'll take a look at that. Maybe next week we'll get a couple of them in, and we'll start doing. I need to do some apples to apples tests where we basically have one person with a whole bunch of mics, and we just go in the same session, in the same environment. We go through all of them and get a sense of what they're doing. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
There's only one thing that I see on this pod pack that would make me say go for the microphone rather than the pod pack, and that's that scissors arm, because it's got exposed springs on it, and with exposed springs you can create some really weird reverbs in the microphone. So I would just get the microphone as opposed to the whole pod pack.
and just be careful with larger diaphragm mics that they're unforgiving in environments. And so you just want to kind of think through that as well. Next question.
Idris Haggy in Fairfax, Virginia, I believe, says, what is an alternative back video capture software of Zoom meeting for Windows?
I think it would be, if it's software, I would say Camtasia. I think it's still kind of one of the best ones on the PC platform. Does anyone have any other? I think that's really still the leader in that side. Go ahead, Jason.
This is a bit of a left field thing, but Windows 10 actually does have screen recording, part of Windows. It's part of the Xbox, installation, right. but it will straight up record your screen, and that's about as bare metal as it gets.
I'll repeat that I wouldn't do that for production. I won't do it for production. Some people might find it useful. I've never seen it be as clean as an external capture to a piece of hardware. Next question.
Graham Cardwell of Belfast, Northern Ireland is in with, we were testing the virtual camera option in Wirecast over Zoom this morning and found it difficult to balance the host volume and playback. Does the panel have any hints to help match the levels? Thanks.
Jeffrey? Throwing the ball before the receiver even turns around. Is he going to catch it?
Yeah. When I do playback on Wirecast, it's never even for me. I always try and keep it lower than the host's volume so you can hear the host over the playback. So I end up going into the volume in the settings and just kind of turning it down to about 30 to 40% of the actual volume to match it up. If you really truly want to match it up, the best thing to do is to route it through a mixer and level it that way.
Next question.
Chris Fritchie, our friend from Tomball, Texas, says, I keep hearing about the beelink. What is it and what does it do?
Well, you got to say it properly. It's the beelink by Courtney. Yeah. Hey, Courtney, what does the beelink do?
Look, and you can probably buy it from Guy because you can't buy it anywhere else. Thanks to office hours. It's just a mini PC. And the thing that I like about this particular model is it's a fairly recent processor. It's a Celeron. It comes with 8 gigs of RAM. It has 2 independent HDMI outputs, as you can see there, and gigabit Ethernet, and runs on 12 volts. It has 4 USB 3 ports, Type A on it, and an SD card slot. And it's about $200.
And it's
$230 for this version, but right now they make them in all kinds of volumes and about that same footprint, but some are quite a bit thicker if you want an i5 or an i3 or even a Ryzen 5, and they all are quite capable of being Zoom rooms and using as individual points for Zoom capture and playback.
Yeah, one of the things that we're using them for is for the remote kits. We really got addicted. So one of the things that we've had trouble with is we send out these remote kits, the smaller remote kits. Our big remote kits go out with a MixPre 3 and a Mac Mini and 6K camera and lights and everything else. The smaller kits we were sending out, and depending on the far end to have a computer they're going to plug it all into. This has become, what we were realizing is the setup time to deal with somebody else's computer and not have control of their camera and not have control of everything else was taking up huge amounts of time in setup. Like it was, adding an hour per person to the process. And at the rate that person costs, it doesn't take very long for us to justify just sending. What we needed was a small PC that did not cost a lot of money, was small and easy to work with, that we could remote into using something like TeamViewer. And so now what we have is the ability to send something out, have them plug everything in, but still have us control it. So now they don't have to, the user on the far end doesn't have to know anything. They just need to plug in the things that say plug in here and connect it to the internet. And it now is something that we can control from our end. I mean, obviously there's some transport issues if they get into a complex, a firewall issue, but for the most part, it has dramatically changed our setup time on the remote ends. Go ahead, Brian.
Being a Mac guy, I don't know a lot about this world. How do these compare to, say, is it a Nook or a Nook or a Nuke or whatever they are?
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, they are basically based on the Nook. The beelinks are really well made. I was really surprised. I've torn them apart, and it's a metal case. It's only got one plastic panel where it has where's the plastic panel? Oh, there it is. That's where the antennas are. It has Wi-Fi 4 and Bluetooth, and so they're really well made, dissipate heat fairly well, and have a very small fan, and there's a fan port on the bottom. That's the only fan in there, and they're very quiet. So,
and they're small enough that you can literally Velcro them to the back of a monitor, and then plug it into the monitor and call it a day.
And you can put 6 of them in a 1R rack mount.
There you go.
But don't, please.
Yeah,
don't.
exactly. All right, next question.
Ronnie Hofsey is back from Norway, and he says, the second time, have experienced a few lockups on the ATEM Mini Pro lately, feeding HDMI from the MacBook M1 through the satechi USB-C Multiport adapter. Video and audio is coming through, but all buttons are locked on up or frozen, cannot be controlled via a StreamDeck or the network either. What could cause this?
Well, Jason will probably say what I'm going to say.
Well, then I'll leave it to you, Alex.
It's the USB. you
Yes,
got to plug that thing directly in.
is.
You got to plug it directly into the computer. Don't put the ATEM through any kind of hub. You'll have to find a place for it to go, but you can try. If you're going to do a hub, I would use OWC. I'll say it for Jason. But I would use OWC's hubs for that if I was going to do that. But outside of that, even then I would be concerned about it. That's the one I just know that one of my USB-C ports is going to be used by my ATEM, and one is going to be used by my mixer, and then I don't have any left. The mixer I've gotten away with a little bit going, in another way, into a regular A or into it. But I try to keep my AV out of the hubs because they just don't seem to support it. With audio through the hub, maybe. Video through the hub, I would not do that. So go ahead, Jeffrey.
There's one concern, and correct me if you've seen it, but I have never seen it, and that he says that the ATEM Mini is locking up, and I've never seen that happen.
No, I think he's talking about the ATEM Mini, because it's getting confused by the USB-C connection. Like it's shorting its whole system out.
Okay, so you've seen that. I've never seen that. So I was thinking hardware at that point.
It's not like it at all. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, the technical term is if a hub is not perfectly to spec, then the USB will try to enumerate each thing that's connected to it. And that if that enumeration is not flawless, things get weird really, really fast, especially on the M1's unified architecture. So don't go there. Satechi has done some good stuff, but in this case, throw that adapter out.
Yep. Next question.
Frank Hilgers, west of Chicago, is all he says. Do the beelinks work by Courtney work out of the box, or is it necessary to reinstall an OS? If so, which OS would you recommend? Thanks.
Go ahead, Guy, real quick.
Yeah, mine shipped with for $589 at a $60 coupon, and it shipped with Windows Pro, and I've been using it to control the AWS instances with Teradici, and it'll do actually 4 monitors on the one that I have with the big graphics card, and it has two ports. And I'm probably rambling, so go ahead to the next.
Yep. Next question. The answer is they all come with OSs. I don't know what I think the smaller one came with Windows 10. I thought it came with
Windows 10
Professional
Pro.
as well.
It comes. Sorry for butting in. It's Windows 10 Pro, and it's activated, so you don't have to install anything, and it's the Pro version.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. Next question.
Theo Mendel of London, often here in the panel, says, are there many pan-tilt zoom security cams for around $150? There are many pan-tilt zoom security cameras around $150 that have 4 megapixels supporting SDI and H.265 out, a much lower price point than PTZOptics and Birddog. When connecting to OBS or Vmix in a house of worship, will there be a noticeable difference between these?
Depends on who's watching. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I don't think you'll like the outcome of a $150 PTZ camera.
It's going to be softer. You're going to have color issues. You're going to have less control over them as far as exposure and so on and so forth. Those are the big things that you're going to pay for. And of course, any kind of PTZ control will be much lower quality than what you have with the higher end ones. There is definitely a huge difference in quality, and we've played with them, a fair bit of them, thinking that they would be a solution, and they haven't been. As a little POV camera or something wide or something that you need to cut away to for a sports event or something like that, they're not bad. I know that Stuart, I think, uses some of them for his pit shots and some other things, and that they're totally valid there. For something that matters, I would probably not use them. I mean, like when they're hero shots. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, and some of them might not be clean shots either. You might get the date or whatnot on the screen.
At that price, to be honest, I'd rather put a webcam in the back of the worship area, just looking out over it, and a wide shot that you're going to use every once in a while as an establishing one. But spending very little money and then asking to do a lot more things is usually not a good combination. Next question.
Our last question before we turn to the Apple keynote discussion comes from Sirkath in Chennai, India. And he says, beelink versus Nucs. Nucs are lesser than beelink, I guess cost less in his region.
Yeah. So I think the beelinks are pretty slick. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
One other thing that the beelink has that the Nuc doesn't is Nuc is all Intel. And if you want an AMD processor inside of that machine, which could be a little bit cheaper, then that might be the way to go with the beelink.
Go ahead, Courtney.
And a lot of the Nucs are bare bones, so you might have to add RAM to them or add your own storage, and the beelinks come with both of those installed already.
Yep, absolutely. All right. We've made it to the end of the first hour. We're going into the second hour. I need a minute to make a couple changes here on my end. Something was plugged into the wrong thing, so I need a second. So while I do that, go ahead and start talking about what you liked and didn't like about the keynote. Who wants to start? Anybody? No. Oh, nobody has any opinions. I have lots of opinions.
All right. Go ahead, Alex. Go ahead.
Go ahead,
get
Jason.
This started.
Yep.
So I am delighted that they finally came out with the with the AirTags. I think that has been a long time coming, and in fact, Mac Rumors had an article over the weekend that said that they had actually had their first FCC filing 2 years ago. So, the first time you heard these rumors, it was 2 years prior. This is the kind of long game that we talk about all the time on office hours. And it is truly an impressive feat to not only keep something relatively secret, but to keep it relatively secret for that long period of a time. I was not thoroughly amazed by the iMacs. Again, to me, if you're going to completely pull all of the customization out of it for the most part, make an iMac that doesn't have a 1 terabyte hard drive for any amount of money, you're gonna lose me very, very quickly. That said, I adore the idea of having Thunderbolt that is completely compliant. You could plug a Thunderbolt 4 hub directly into an iPad Pro. That is so cool. And for those who don't have an iPad Pro, you can do that currently with any Express dock from OWC. Does anyone else have any other thoughts? I mean, I really could do my own hour on this. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, yeah, just a couple of thoughts on some of the things you're saying. I too thought the AirTags were really fascinating, and just because I lose keys and stuff like that, just enough so that I think that's going to be a huge thing. I was interested that they rolled it out about a week before they rolled them out at this keynote. They were talking about opening up a second vendor for that and supporting, and a lot of people talked about that being an antitrust move. So I think Apple is paying attention to the fact that they're really not trying to completely dominate when they come out with a new technology anymore and burn everybody else's chance. They want to be a player, a great player, but they don't want to be the only people. I think that was a big deal. And as to the low-end single iMac thing, I think there will be a lot of reception area type things where designers want to take these new colors, put them in there where somebody who's answering phones and doing minimal databasey type things, but really doesn't have any use for more than that. So as a beginning step, that probably makes sense. We got Craig and Charles up next. Craig, why don't you go and Charles follow?
Oh, okay, thanks. Yeah, I think the iPad Pro was stunning. What they've done with that and the direction they're gone. It's interesting that they said in one of the keynotes a few years ago how they they weren't planning on converging the Mac OS with the iOS platforms, which I think everybody knew at the time was smoke and mirrors. The iMac for me, I like a lot of stuff about it. I think you're right that it's what it's always been, which is a not entry level, but a low end Mac for home use and stuff. What amazed me about it is they still can't get rid of the chin on it, or the bib, depending on what people call it. I think that's that's still something.
You have someplace to put your Post-it notes, dude.
Yeah, with your passwords on it. The big takeaway for me about the event though was the event itself and the production values of it. I think they've shown again the way forward with how to do product launches and events and really make it engaging and just take it to a new level, as much as I hate that term, a new level of actual value.
Yeah, and let's try to turn it towards the production value of the actual event and what we thought about some of the structures. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, actually asked about it and questions. One thing that felt off to me, and it's just watching the visual rhythm of how things move. It's very important. And I asked a question about the movement of some of the drones in some parts seemed a little janky to me. Now, some were perfect and very smooth, but coming from a person that I've had to come in to do 3D cameras for a product launch or anything like that, I saw the pitch in the yaw, and I think it's around like after Tim, there's a female presenter, and after her, that next drone shot has some movement. That's the first thing that stood out to me. I had to replay it 3 times to make sure that I wasn't going crazy. That's the one thing that really stood out to me. It's the smallest of things, but from the production quality of everything else, yeah, like that shot right there. It stood out to me as just a little off, like they shot the drone speed slower and then they sped it up.
Yeah, I think that part of the problem you get into, now see, that's the transition right there, by the way. So if you look at what just happened there, you find a place, and I, that's a hard thing. If you go back and around it, they're going to rock up, and then there's a new take, and they come back down. And that new take is, my guess is that was so I think that they actually used a technocrane a little bit, on this, because that moving shot there, the pool shot will is definitely almost definitely a technocrane, maybe a mini, but it definitely it's when you look at it from a technical perspective, it's a complicated shot. Now go ahead, Jason, and then Mickey.
So that strange motion is, I think they were trying to go for, an FPV, like, straight up, very, very fast, the turning, the strange, unnecessary skyline is the result, I think, of your frame rate being mismatched with your feet per second. As a rule, you don't generally want to go faster than your frame rate, or you start getting this odd effect. So yeah, I noticed that too, and I just thought, it's weird, but it's it's how it is.
Go ahead, Mickey, and then Courtney.
Yeah, I feel that with the transitions, especially the aerials, they went pretty over the top with all of it, and almost maybe borderline ridiculous. But I'm sure there is a reasoning to that. I don't know what message
I thought it was a lot of, but for people like me, at least, like if we look at this, let's see if I can. Oops, I hit the wrong button. If we look at this shot here, let's see if I can get this to do it. Oh, why am I not? Maybe I clicked on the wrong thing here. Hold on. There we go. So if you look at this shot here, as it kind of rocks around, now this is so here's so you see that? There's the transition right there. I get you into motion blur, and then I basically, there's a transition point right there. And then it moves through here. But this is a pretty, from a drone perspective, while a little bit of turning and tilting there, it's a pretty complicated. And then they right there. There's your next transition. Boom, right there. That's the next transition to this like pushing through the grass. Now this is stuff I feel like they took from Tiny World. They got whoever to do it. And then through here, that is so then, and of course you're using this. There's your transition point there. You're wondering how these get kind of built. And then you're coming up from here. And so the, you know, it's a couple shots that I thought were, you know, relatively well put together. You know, so, you know, like it was, you know, is it a maybe Lord of the Rings level, maybe not, or Star Wars level, but as a, you know, for a keynote, I was color me impressed. You know, like you know, I was like, that is great. And again, I think that what we're getting back to is, can we actually go back to going on stage? I'm not sure. Go ahead, Mickey, and then Courtney.
Yeah, like my question to the panel is like that, for example, that B shot. Why? What does it do for the audience? It's just cool.
It's just fun.
It's eye candy.
It doesn't have
like
to,
it's
like,
eye
like,
candy.
it's just
You
like
never see that on a keynote.
Little break. So one thing you have to think about when you're talking about anything, whether it's a keynote or whether it's training or teaching or whatever, is that you want to wake the audience up every once in a while, where you're doing something that is really cool that may not, but like, so a lot of people, when I'm speaking at events and so on and so forth, they would think that I would just suddenly break into song, but I would suddenly I would tell a story that was oftentimes not very related to whatever I was speaking about. The reason I was doing that was specifically because I could see long blinks in the audience. So I'd see people like their eyes slowing down. And so I would immediately stop, tell a story, and let some oxygen come in, and then go into the next thing. And so sometimes it doesn't have, the meaning of it doesn't have to be, I'm trying to tell you something. It is a subtle cue. It is a subtle point to anybody who's watched Apple TV Plus that's a Tiny World transition. Like that's what that is. I mean, it's subtly referring back to a show that they do. You know, so there's a little bit of that. But I think that sometimes it's just light to have to give your spongy mass a little bit of time to breathe and to spark it a little bit, and then put you back into the next conversation. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I don't know if anybody else thinks it, but I think the flying through the grass and up to the bee and then through the sprinkler is all CGI, and it's morphed into a jib arm shot for the end, or a Steadicam shot for the end. Because, you know, when you think about drones, you know, A, most of them are not waterproof. B, you could never fly up to a bee and have it stay there.
No, I think the bee shot is CG. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's CG. And plus, when it flies through the sprinkler, you'll notice that the water clears from the camera lens immediately as it comes out of the sprinkler. So, you know, there's no automatic water.
But I think the only
CG systems on drones. You know,
I think the only CG shot though is the bee moment is a CG shot.
And I think going through the sprinkler is also CG.
Well, going through the sprinkler at the end of the B shot. Yeah. I mean, so I think
that's the one I mean.
Yeah. Because it goes through the sprinklers earlier, which kind of sets you up for it. That little bit of sprinkle, a drone might not go very long, but it could definitely make it through it.
Oh, you can make it.
Yeah, you could get
Trust
through
me,
it.
you can make it.
So I think you have, that jib shot into a drone shot, into a CG shot, back into a probably either a jib or a technocrane shot. Although the more I looked at these, there's the angle that you have when you look at something. So a jib can,
can you play that shot again?
Yeah. Hold on, let me. I have to click on this. So when we back up here, so
you notice the water.
This is
clear.
Yeah. So this I think is CG, and I think Courtney agrees, or Courtney thinks it's CG, and I agree. One or the other.
It's all
right there.
Right there.
So this is a drone shot.
Right.
So this is a drone shot here, you know, and a very technical drone shot. Like this is a good drone operator. You're cutting through a lot of things that if you hit any of them, so she's going to spin away.
Yeah, it's a racing drone driver. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're going to go, there's usually a frame that you can find right there. That's the frame out of one into the other, because it changes in direction. And then you're coming through here. But the things you worry about, I mean, this is like, you know, a little off, and you're going to clip the lights there. And then you're going to go through here, and then you're going to dive down, which probably it probably just ran ahead. So it probably is kind of a CG, but I think that's the first frame of the CG right there with that blade of grass. And then because it's also a different kind of contrast and everything else. Hyper
also
real.
a drone. Yeah, a drone can't head through grass like that without crashing.
Yeah, exactly. And then through here and
or,
the other thing is
a sprinkler.
The other thing, and then this is all water effect that's being, in compositing or whatever. And also they transition from the outside of the loop to the inside of the loop. And so anyway, but then one of the things you want to look at here on a lot of these is the angle at which they're going in. Now, this one probably could have been a jib, but
you notice there's no more pitch and yaw. There's no yaw.
Oh yeah, no, it was definitely a jib. The question is whether it's a jib or a for me, the question is it a jib or is it a technocrane? And the reason that it could be one or the other is a jib is gonna the jib can swing this way, right? And then pan up and down. What you're gonna see in some of those shots is it's swinging this way and then going like this, or swinging this way and going like that. And that is something that usually is a technocrane because it's the arm coming over and then the arm's able to pull back in on itself. They could theoretically do that with a jib on a dolly or something like that, but you wouldn't. I mean, you would, if you had the money to put a technocrane in, you would, because it's going to be a lot. The movement is often too smooth to make that, work well.
There's another possibility. There's a Steadicam that has a rotating gimbal on the end of it.
My brother has one.
It keeps the horizon level and it can
Trinity.
go from low mode to high mode.
Yeah, it's just that if you look at in this one, you could probably do it that way. And you may be right. That's using I believe it's a Trinity rig. It's the Airy Trinity that sits on top of the Steadicam. And when I can get my brother out of working on films, we're going to get him on for a second hour and have him show it to you because he's got one. So that to your point, you're right that shot that we just saw could definitely be a Trinity rig that could pull that up. The one over the water, though, I don't think could be a Trinity rig because you'd be going through the water. We'll show that one in a second. Go ahead, Aaron, and then Mickey, and then Bill, and then Jason, but pretty quick.
So I think overall what we saw with the whole thing was a theme, the spring theme, right? They had a spring for the logo. Everything was springy. There was, they really honed in on that story as the visual elements of the whole thing. And they did the little bee thing, all of that CGI. There was a lot of CGI compared to like previous ones. Previous ones, it was limited to transitions. I think there was some CGI green screen stuff in this one too.
There definitely is. All those underground shots are all green screen. Though not, I don't think. Go ahead.
No, go on.
I was gonna say some of it's green screen, some of it's roto. So if you look at the kind of the atrium inside of the Steve Jobs Theater, I think that when they're stepping in front of something that's there, that's a rotoscope. That's not a that they're rotoing them out as opposed to shooting in front of green screen, because that way they get all the lighting, they get everything else, and roto is easy. I mean, at this point, we have people who are really good at it. Not easy, but
one thing that impressed me most was the outdoor lighting. Keeping outdoor lighting consistent like that throughout multiple shots like that is tricky. So I don't know how they got the level of light they got, but
log.
The sun was well. That's probably true. Yeah, the HDR didn't hurt.
You shoot. I'm sure this was shot in log. And then you're able to correct a lot of that stuff. You can see it in some of the shots where it feels like they've pulled some of the faces have a look that looks like when you compress a lot, you get this kind of look on their face that
a little bit.
And there's also some fill light there. You can definitely see a fill, on the side there that's going on. That's kind of helping make that
transition
work.
in that one was really cool too. The thing to going on this boat. I don't even know if he was actually on the boat, but
he really probably was. Yeah, it would be easier to shoot that on the boat than to not. Go ahead, Mickey, and then Bill.
Yeah, that shot going out of the sprinkler going into Tim Cook definitely felt like a what do you call this? A Steadicam shot as opposed to a jib, because I think it's relatively simple enough that why take the time and manpower to set that up for a CEO to wait around on set? I know, I mean, he's on campus, I get it, but you don't want to waste his time.
Well, but the thing is that for all of those, he's just going to show up after everything's been tested and there's a stand-in that's done it 100 times, and he just does his thing once. Like, he won't have to wait for anything. Like they would have had that thing all pre-programmed, fairly well. I mean, if it was me, I would for a lot of those shots, I'd probably think about a Mark Roberts or a motorized precision shot, because it's so technical. You want to come out of that CG shot and come up and do what it wants to do. So that angle has to be done just right. And you could definitely do it with Steadicam, but it would be easier for me to do it with a control arm. And these control arms are only, in the grand scheme of things, they're $4,000 or $5,000 a day to have that arm, and then you're programming the move, in that process, and you program it, and then it just does it exactly the same way every single time. Now this one was too big of a shot. What Guy's showing here, I'll show it here because I can draw on it. See that? Yeah, this is a great transition. so good. So it definitely makes the pool at Apple feel a lot bigger. But when you let me see if I can. I got to figure out a better way to control this. This is not working.
Yeah, they had that wide angle lens and then crashed into the thing. It's really good.
Yeah.
Maybe in a CGI transition between the two, or maybe it'd been on a Hydroflex crane, which is a waterproof version of a Techno crane.
Yeah. No. Well, getting down there with it. I mean, I just didn't know that they were going to show everybody that about the whales being down there. That was not.
That pond is much deeper than it looks on this.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's a lot deeper, and the fact that it looks like stones on the top is kind of amazing. So this is hold on. So if we cut to this here, so when we look at this shot here, this is coming across the water. So you really need an arm, to get across the water there. But watch what happens. This is when you're just showing off, because you're gonna come across, and
that deep shadows. That's late in the day, early in the morning.
Yeah.
Early in the morning.
I think it's early in the morning.
Really early.
Yeah, it's early.
That's early in the morning. So it depends. It's a circle, so it could be, but it'll start to pull back with him, and that's the hard part with a jib, is to swing. You can swing over, but it's rigid. And so when you start, and that's coming up over water, so it feels like a Techno crane, without knowing. That shot is.
The lens is really wide too.
So yeah,
it may not have actually gone over the water.
Who's pulling focus on that?
With a lot of those
skilled cameras,
a skilled focus puller, like that's who does it. You sit there and you just, now again, with some of these, when you have when you do something with a control arm, a motion control arm, that you may do for some of these that are rehearsed, then the arm does it. And what's really nice about those kinds of shots, to do it with a motion control arm as opposed to a hand operated one, is that you can keep on refining it with a stand-in until the focus, everything else is spot on, as long as everyone meets their mark. The disadvantage is if the talent doesn't do exactly what they need to do, then it's more complicated. You want a human there to make the error correction, as opposed to the computer just going to do what it's going to do.
Well, that's why I was wondering if there's some IR in there.
There can be, but that in a move like that, it gets really confused quickly. So that's the real problem there. Bill, and then Jason.
So we've missed the overall power of this. I think this is a.
Well, we're digging into it. Like this.
Well, I understand that, but this is important.
But I just want to keep. We're going to run out of time.
Every single shot in here is a branding opportunity for Apple, and what is Apple saying to everybody through this whole thing? We care about the natural world. We care about aesthetics. We care about landscape architecture. This is not manicured Versailles. This is a natural created environment that is very eco-friendly, and that is part of Apple's branding.
No, it's also telling people who
powerful.
Working at Apple is great, because the campus is really cool, even though you'll be all squashed together.
But that's why
now we don't know what to do.
Right? The B is an ecosystem thing. They're endangered. That was not a mistake. That was a message.
I think it was showing off Tiny World, but anyway, Jason.
One more technical thought is as we start looking more at the aerials and the transitions, there's this common thing that you'll do, which is basically a variation of the Hitchcock effect, where when you have a drone shot, you will speed ramp and push ever so slightly into the frame, artificially zooming into the frame to increase the speed and the tightness. And my guess is that all of these quick little turns and twists were done artificially and in post.
Maybe some of them. I mean, you definitely could.
They were tightened. They were tightened using post to make it look more exacting.
Right. Yeah, Fenwick.
I was just showing. I think I found evidence on the DJI site how they actually pulled this thing off. I think we all missed an announcement
in the West.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I think we missed something.
Is there a camera on that?
So, out of all of them, the first one, the first from Steve Jobs, and I don't know what her name is, was the one that bothered me the most, and that had to have been a drone to a jib shot. And I'm going to show it really quick. So basically, it's going through. What it's going to do is it's going to
we were talking about this earlier. Yeah, we were talking about this earlier.
Yeah,
up and then down.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Yeah, we were talking about that one earlier.
Drones gimbals don't tilt up.
Yeah, so you had to swing that one up. Yeah, so that's a hard shot to do. But yeah, and then of course we're gonna, in about 4 minutes we'll switch over to questions. But one of the other ones we were talking about CG. So this is where this is pretty much all green screen. So if you're wondering back there, I think it's done pretty well. I think that the things that you have to look at here are stuff like feet. This is why it's really hard to do feet. The ambient occlusion, I don't think worked here completely, and it rarely does. You really have to nail it.
Green, yeah.
Is the set 100% virtual, or do you think it's an actual practical plate?
I would argue that it's 100% virtual. Like it's not. This is all virtual. He's on a green screen. Yeah. It would be there's nothing about this set that would lead you to believe that there was any reason for them to do any part of it. In the real thing,
there's
in
no
my
reason
opinion.
for a room to look like that architecturally either.
Except it looks like Batman. Like that's what that looks like that's what it is. Is it's kind of the underground. It's when they remember when Batman pulls out the big when he gets the Jeep or whatever.
The Tumbler.
Yeah, the Dark Knight. That's right.
Yeah. So all that's a that shot is a relatively, I mean, it's hard to do well, and I don't think that they hit it at visual effects level quality. But here's the other one we were talking about here, where I don't think that they did green screen. Hold on. Let's get to this wide shot. Hold on. Oh, there we go. So this one I don't think is, I don't think this is green screen. It could be, but I think it would be much easier.
Wall,
so notice this. See how her reflection looks so much better across the floor than his did. So I think that is there. Now you could do an LED wall. I wouldn't. I would roto, and I think that I did notice in another shot where her hair looks just a little smoother along that edge. And so this is something that would be very easy to do the entire thing practically. Drop this frame in and simply roto these areas here to make that work. That's the path of least resistance that you would use to execute that shot. But I don't know how they did it. Go ahead, Sky.
Their feet positioning, I noticed that they were very strident in their stance in both of the people that are standing.
They have control. To get back to Bill's thing, they have control.
Well,
they're
exactly.
Stable. That's
their feet are directly under their shoulders.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and jump to some of the questions.
Brian Anderson of Silver Springs, Maryland says, now that we have an iPad with USB-C Thunderbolt, what are the chances of future iPhone having the same?
Go ahead, Jason.
Eventually, but I don't think they're in any hurry because the iPhone is much more power constrained. It's more important to them to have an all-day something than an insanely fast something when it comes to the I/O.
Yeah. Go ahead, Aaron.
The MFI people have been told not to count on a port being there at all. So I don't really see a port in the iPhone in the future at all.
I could also see a place where the iPhone Pro has a USB-C connector and the other iPhones don't. I could see that happening as well. One thing go ahead, Bill.
Well, they've talked a good little bit about their IP ratings, and I know that's something that they care about on the iPhones in case you drop it in some shallow water and don't want it to go down. So any ports that compromise the exterior, I think they would shy away from.
Yeah, and it definitely muddies the water in the whole, like, you have to have the same connectors or whatever. They're like, well, we don't have any connectors. And the Pro version, if you call it Pro, you could theoretically say it's a tighter vertical market and so on and so forth. This is, I mean, obviously a Steadicam shot in this case. So one of the things that you want to look at is how they sell a Steadicam shot, or how you set this up, is to have stuff in the foreground. So having that stuff in the foreground creates all that parallax and kind of gives you a good feel for they're definitely using that table to kind of create that. It would be much less of a shot with stuff only behind it. And even when they settle, one of the things you want to notice is they still left a little bit of that, that this gives it kind of that depth that you may want, is having that wasn't obviously by accident, to leave a little bit of that in front. You'll see that a lot in kind of standard kind of film production. All right, next question.
Is the one Charles mentioned before. I think we probably covered it, unless he has something else to add. We can move on to the Cami Vanzafake. I have a hard time with your name. Sorry. Carmi, I'm sorry. I do that badly too. Watching Apple evolve from WWDC, which was very close to what was done in person, to their first production versions last year, September and October, November, and finally April's full movie. It seems clear they've really embraced digital first. Do you expect anyone else to move in the same direction? And if so, what are your thoughts?
Go ahead, Jason.
Many have tried, and Apple has both the resources and kind of the following to really, really sell it. Yes, I think the short answer is yes, and how well they will pull it off will just depend.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing they've done is they have been there was a lot of weird attempts. I mean, I think that the Microsoft one was okay. The Google video was super weird, like super weird. So I think Apple is getting more and more of embracing a really theatrical release of their products, and I think that is, I'm super excited about. And I think Apple will, as always, will start leading a way where it's kind of hard to not do that. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, I actually completely agree. I think we've all lived long enough to see Apple do something first, get criticized a little bit for it, and then the industry follow along. And I think this is one of those things where they have embraced this due to the fact, as you said, Alex, how many people they can impact at the same time with the same message. Not the people that are there compared to the people that are at home watching. Now it's a cohesive message.
On stage, that would have taken at least 30 minutes longer to say, and to show and everything else than it did there. So you're basically pulling a lot of the air out of the system. I don't see how Apple, I mean, they may be able to go back to stage events. If anything, I could see them going back to stage events where it's essentially a live person saying like 4 words and then playing another video that's 15 minutes long or 10 minutes long. And they were kind of going that direction in the past anyway, but I could see them doing that to make it feel live. But I think that as someone in the press, I would rather come and just watch a movie and then get what I really came for, which was the goodie bag, the being able to talk to Apple engineers and being able to play with the hardware. The goodie bag, the engineers and the hardware are the things that you go for. The stage thing is the thing that you put up with. Like, let's be clear, like when you talk to press people, I don't know if they'll say it as bluntly as I will, but you sit through the stage event so that you can go play with the hardware. So this will have no effect on their interest in going to Steve Jobs Theater and hanging out and being at the Apple campus and everything else. They'll all want to come, they'll all want to talk, and you'll get a better chance of doing that. And so I think that's the thing. Go ahead, Courtney, and then Chris.
Yeah, their Apple stage events used to always be about 10% journalists and 80% Apple employees.
Yeah.
And 90% of the time was taken up with ooh from reactions from the employees. And
because the press will make no reaction. The press just sit there stone faced,
typing away on their laptops. But and the other thing is the new way you completely eliminate the demo fail.
Yeah.
We'll never see another demo.
And you still communicate all the things. And I get people say, oh, I really want to see, I really like the drama of whether it's going to work or not. I don't really enjoy that. I just here's the problem. As a consumer, I just want to know what you released. Like, I know it's Apple. I know it'll work. There might be some quirk in it or whatever if they do it. And I know that that's just logistics, and I just don't care. Like, just get to the point. Like, I just want it to be as fast as possible. And now we're getting to the point where we're getting as fast as possible. Go ahead, Chris.
Interestingly enough, you can rent this place. It's in LA, $400 an hour. It's basically it may be the Batcave. 10-hour minimum.
That's great.
And it's in the 3 mile zone. So it's pretty cool.
That's great. Nigel?
Yeah, I think the other thing about the video approach they're taking is they have a much more diverse crowd of people. It's much harder to get those people to do what they're doing on stage if they're not practiced. So they get a much more diverse group. Although I think it's time to fix some of the language. I know it'd be branding, but the best since the last, I think, is becoming very tired in that format.
Well, I always say it's our best one ever. I always go, what were you going to say? Oh, this one wasn't as good as the last one, but we're going to put it out anyway. I mean, like what are you going to say? So to your point, you don't need to say that anymore. It better be. Go ahead, Sky.
I remember watching when Apple showed up at NAB and they were playing with the big boys and the big monies that were being spent by all of these other, the Avid booth and the Sony booth and all of that. And then all of a sudden they decided not to show up. And what a change that made. So this conversion of the theatrical performance into a video film production, again,
and I feel like
a lot more control.
I feel like to a point earlier, I feel like the performances are so much better now than they were on stage. I mean, they were so stale on some of those performances on stage because it's really hard, and now your adrenaline's pumping, and now you're not standing up there, and you have to walk out. And this is the Sky's position. This isn't your job. Like, this isn't what you do all the time, is stand out on stage in front of 1,000 people playing out to millions or tens of millions of people. That's a lot of pressure. Whereas now you just sit with a film crew, and if you didn't get it right, you do it again until you get it right. And I think that it's just much more enjoyable to watch. Go ahead, Jason, and then Stephen.
Well, and getting back to the question, from your initial answer, you really do just kind of go for the stuff. So it would not surprise me in the future, for example, if Apple were to do something like, in certain stores like Cupertino, Los Angeles, Denver, Dallas, Chicago, and then New York, they have the Apple engineers and they have the stuff for press, and then the rest of it is just virtual playout.
Well, I think that they do already play it out to some of the stores now. So you can go and watch it live at some of the stores. But to your point, being able to have engineers and other people to talk about it there so people don't have to fly in. I think we're going to see a lot more of that because I think that even as COVID pulls back, I think a lot of people have found they don't want to fly as much anymore. Not ever, but I forgot how much I hate it. All right, Stephen, and then Mickey.
Well, to his point, when I went by the Apple store here in Berkeley, 4th Street, which is one of the hidden stores, really, they were pulling the film down off the windows, and the catering truck was cleaning up.
Yep. Mickey?
Yeah, back during the live stage shows, some of the more awkward and painful to watch presentations were the ones from the developers, the third parties. And during the recent shows, they've turned to cutting a very snappy and upbeat promo, essentially, with the developers, and it's a totally different experience.
Way better, I would say. Go ahead, Chris.
I literally, after dropping Trish off at work, I drove by the Bay Street store in Emeryville. They had, during deep COVID, they had converted it into like a, like you could only walk in 10 feet and talk at a window type thing. And it's now completely reopened.
Yes. Yeah. Another thing that I think that I oftentimes want to kind of steal from Apple when they do stuff like this is, so here you can see the explanation. If I can get in our learning is me being able to get my playout to work better. So here's these kind of breakdowns. You always want to pay attention to these breakdowns of what Apple's doing, because what they have to do is show you a bunch of information that is, it's showing you a bunch of information. So now he's going to talk a little bit, and now it's showing you all these different, I'm going to do this, and and you start to see how they're kind of explaining each section of it. And of course, Apple has spent an enormous amount of time to figure out how to, as quickly as possible, show you something technical that makes a difference for what you're doing. As educators, you want to like watch and rewatch their explanations of how their products work and how those things work, because it is just a gold mine of ideas of how to explain a concept, because they do it so well and they do it with so much more budget than you have. And the big difference in their budget, like what they just did there, not complicated. Thinking about that, complicated. Like in designing it and going through it. So use up their design ideas. That's all I'm saying, is like use up the design ideas and just because they do it better than almost anyone else in the world as far as being able to open things up and break things out and explain how that all works. All right, let's go.
They're also ridiculously consistent with the use of those assets that they make.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Jason Panks in Nashville, Tennessee says, "What's roto?"
Rotoscoping is drawing a line. So when we don't have green screen, it's like drawing a little line all the way around the person. If I stay still enough, it'll stay in there. And then when I go like this, it's drawing another line. And when I go further over, it's drawing another line every single frame. Now, what you actually do is you draw the line here and you draw the line here, and then you see where this goes and you correct this one. So you're constantly, and you let the computer will do a lot of that for you. But it's painstaking to draw basically a spline. And when you start talking about like when you're doing it, you are drawing all these little hairs. You have to figure out a way to represent those. And that can be a mixture of compositing and rotoscoping. But it was something that was done in the 30s, old school, and now it's done with pretty high-end programs like Mocha and other things like that. We'll go real quickly. We're running out of time. Mickey and then Bill, real fast, like super fast.
Real fast, sometimes even when there's green screen.
Yeah, actually, the joke is about 70% of green screen shots have some roto in them, because it's easier to roto it out than to keep on pushing at the screen. You get what you need, and a lot of times you're using garbage mats and so on and so forth, which are still roto, to kind of separate what we call divide and conquer the key. Go ahead, Bill, real quick.
It's basically just retouching every single frame in a stream of frames, hand one at a time.
Yep. Next question.
Joshua Feingold in New York says, "How much do you think Apple spent to create the event?" Ooh, more than we can afford.
I think that the B shot, just put it in perspective, that drone to B to out, I'd probably bid $150,000. Like, to put it in perspective, $150,000-$200,000 for that one shot, for that one sequence. Just to kind of put it in perspective, to build all that in CG at that level.
So a couple million, you think, for the entire thing?
I'd probably bid 10 to 20 million, like somewhere in that range is my guess. Go ahead, Charles, and then Chris.
How long do we think from first shot of production to final delivery that took?
No idea. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
To Charles, I'd say 3 months. My guess about the B shot, and having done some work for Apple years ago, is that somebody probably bid the whole thing. Like, yep, we're going to do this. It's going to cost you blankety blank. And there are moments of where they say, just do it. Just make it better. And the B shot may be one of those things. But I know that when I was doing stuff for Apple, that's what we would do. We'd have our budget, and then kind of like what you do, Alex, you're like, I want this to be great. Throw another camera, pull another camera off the shelf.
Yeah. I think that one. So I think that probably had someone internally said, I really want a shot like Tiny World, like from the thing, I think somewhere from pretty high up, because that was a big. I know it's so funny. Like, as a production person, you go, that was like this tiny little shot, and anybody who knows what they're looking at, we're like, whoa, that was expensive. like that. Like for us, we just look at it like that was a big. I think that was a lot of discussions. Go ahead, Bill.
I just want to say that when you get into budgeting things like at Apple's level, it's probably the first month worth of the profit they'll make on AirTags. These companies sell so much that you have the budgets just. I remember a client of mine, a pretty big one, saying, we were doing a videotape for him, and they said, look, if we sell 3 of these per store for 3 months, we paid for you 10 times over. the scale that they are working on means that the budget really isn't at all the stoppage. It's getting these products out there. They're high margin, great products.
And if we look at this again, I mean, this is just, so again, incredible shot of the engineer. This is all CG, you know, and you've got these little animations, you know, showing this. We'll go a little bit faster on it, but you're doing the animations here, you know, incredible animate. This is expensive. Like, this isn't something that you know, that you had an intern do from somewhere. This is an ad agency. This is lots of, you know, and again, a great shot. Now you're showing, I want that room.
Are you saying the blue gases don't come out of it when it makes music?
Yeah.
Oh, I
those
gotta
are
cancel my
Apple
order. I gotta go.
microphones, okay?
Back to Windows.
But again,
Back
like
to Windows.
when we think about the true, like, I the reason I wanted to show this is because you want to take, especially from Apple, which I think now is for me, obviously had a size advantage. And so I thought Frame.io was the best keynote I had ever seen. And I think this one is now the best keynote. You know, I think that the open was a little long and weird, but I think outside of that, I think that the Apple keynote was the best keynote I've seen. And what I do when I see something that I go, that is great, whether it's a commercial, whether it's a show, whether it's an effect, a movie, or whatever, is I will break it down and watch it over and over and over and over again to figure out all the little bits and pieces. And so this isn't going to be the way I do. I'll spend hours on something like this, but it is it's an intro to like doing. I would highly recommend breaking this one down. Go ahead, Jason. And but again, even as an educator, I would break it down because of all the things when they explain how their product works. That is a great explanation or a great example of how you could make your education better. And you can use students, or you don't have to use agencies that will charge a lot of money. Go ahead, Jason, and then Courtney.
I'll be mindful because we've got a fair number of questions.
Yeah, we gotta go
I
fast.
love pitching things. It's my favorite part of my job. And the way I tend to do this is I study these things, but it's not like I copy them. I am going for, how do I visualize something that is technical? And it is difficult. And I love that example, you know, in Keynote, that expansion is fast and it's easy, but really you can explain just about anything in a way that is similar. And that's really what you should be drawing from.
Absolutely. Courtney?
Yeah, I think this can be treated like an hour-long commercial, whereas they used to buy a lot of network time to do little 30-second, 1-minute commercials. This solves the same problem. They solves the same market solution, and they can put it online for lots more people to see. And I remember when Apple would not even stream their events. They refused to stream their events.
Well, that's because they thought that they were keeping, back then it was to make sure that all the press had the time to put it out themselves. They were afraid the press wouldn't do it back when they, but now everyone talks about it anyway. The one thing, by the way, that we'll mention, then we'll go into questions, is that also notice that they built an entirely separate stream for ASL, which I thought was really great, rather than trying to clump it together. I think when people try to clump these together, it's kind of it falls between two receivers. Like, it's not great for ASL, not great for the people who are watching. Having a separate entire feed on YouTube and on their website for ASL allowed them to give ASL what it deserved without taking away from the general user. And I don't see a lot of other people doing that, building those separate feeds. I think that's relatively revolutionary, and I think it's a great idea. All right, let's go to the next question.
Chris Fritchie of Trumbull, Texas says, what did you think of the audio issue while Tim is walking around? 4 minutes, 50 seconds in, mostly while he's walking around.
I'd have to look at it. I
don't remember any of that, so I'm wondering if it was a local breakup for you.
Oh, well, I mean, we can look at it here. Hold on, let me.
I can't imagine Apple letting bad audio
said
remain in the.
Well, it could be one of those things.
There was a pan anomaly.
4 minutes.
And yeah, I remember thinking about that too.
So at 450, did he say 450?
Yeah, 450.
Yes, 450, 4:50, 450.
Well, what I can say is that in the record, I don't see it.
How would you see you mean you don't hear it?
It's on audio.
If there had been a live problem, they would have gone back and fixed it.
Yeah, this wasn't live.
On the repost. No, I mean, but in its original playout.
I don't this one I got pretty quickly, so it would have been the original stream. I don't see it. I don't see it there. So I don't.
It could have been only in the live broadcast, right?
Could have been a drop packet
itself,
somewhere.
It was just some sort of one of the glues was strange.
Missed it. Yeah, something got missed there. Next question.
Eric Kramer, Portland, Maine. Apple keynote. When do you think Apple will publish the making of for the keynote?
Never.
It seems like a
That's
primary
what,
venue for
hey,
highlighting their technology.
This is as close as you're going to get, is us talking about it. Yeah, and we might extend this out longer. I think that for the next one, for some of these that are this good, I think we may even do kind of a lab at some point where we have more time to kind of play with it. Next question.
Neil Avado of Boca Raton, Florida, says on the keynote, the people of color, they look like CGI. How to make them look more natural? Oh, African American specifically.
Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, I didn't get that sense, and I think he's mostly speaking about the gentleman at 3834, Raja. He's the first one that comes into a completely black room with the iPad way behind him, and the lighting on him due to the environment needs to be a little bit different. So maybe that is what you're starting to see. But what I constantly looked for was the consistency in skin tone throughout all the shots of a particular presenter, and they were spot on.
You'll notice the lighting doesn't match from the close-up to the wide shot.
Yeah, and I will say this was the weirdest part of the show. Like the one where they reproduce a stage, I was totally like, why are we here? Like, why are we doing this? And so my brain went immediately like, I don't know why I know that they spend a lot of money on a stage, so probably good to use it every once in a while. But my brain just went to I don't understand why we're reproducing this vestige of the past. Anyway, next question.
Guy Cochran here in the panel in Seattle. Any production values that we can take from the Apple event and apply to our own man in the kitchen with the similar budgets these two programs have?
What?
Well, it's not it's post versus live. So and I think this is what we get into is that there's so much you can do when you're doing it in post. The Apple event, I always say that there are 3 reasons to go live. One is if you're breaking news, sports, or interactivity. Apple is big enough that I consider Apple breaking news. Like billions of dollars will move at that day because of what they're doing. So they can go live, they can just push something out live, and there's so many things that are actually happening live because of it. There's people like us watching it live. There's people, press going crazy watching the thing. So there's an event or something happening that makes it worth them doing that. But the fact that they can play it out makes it that they have total control and they can have a lot of fun with it. I don't know. I mean, I think that improving our camera shots, it'd be great to put a Steadicam in there. But go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, even the pre-records, I mean, there was some seed, I can't pronounce it, but there was some seed that they went into some history of it and the health benefits and things like that. I'm just wondering if we even had like a 45-second play out, just like a real quick, dense, some close-ups or, how to pronounce it, just cooking temperature. Like, 'cause I think she said that if you drop it into the oil, it releases the health benefits or something like that. And so...
And I think that the hard part with that, we found when we do examples like that live, it's really hard unless you really set it up and rehearse it, to make it work. Cutting away, I think, would feel odd in a cooking show, like cutting away. Like, now we're going to show you how this works, blah, 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 blah. But I do think that if there was a science desk that was like talking, I see a possibility of either a science desk talking into the show and having some animations pop up or whatever while they're talking about it. I also think that there's a possibility of a subdivision of the show where there's one of the breakout rooms that you go into is just science. Like literally they're watching it through the lens of science. So there's a whole bunch of people just talking about the chemical reactions, and you've got nutritionists in there talking about what that means, and you've got a bunch of other things. And so I think that's a kind of an interesting possibility. Go ahead, Sky.
Graham Kerr actually did 128 shows where he brought in the science of the concept, and it never got the light of day, but that was a whole political issue. And so it's sitting up at Toronto in boxes. But to your point of doing an interstitial, it would be a throw to of the lulls that we were
right. I mean, there's definitely places where, to your point, where in long cooking, imagine like right now we had like an 8-minute cooking time. But imagine something that might have like bread. There could be 45 minutes of discussion about why bread works and what, there's, while it's in the oven, there could be 45 minutes of how bread works and why it works and what it does.
But
you
but
could
again,
really,
the animation, you would want to animate it, and it would
right.
have to be interesting and entertaining because,
Or it
and
could
then
be-
to Guy's point of the budget, all things are possible with time and money. And if, again, maybe
Right.
that's where somebody wants
Yes.
to jump in on that.
yeah. So the thing is that you could get into, you could make something that did a bunch of those animations and so on and so forth. It doesn't have to be the whole, you don't have to animate the whole thing the whole time. It's just that there's little, to your point, Guy, there's like little interstitials of explaining something or this is how it works and everything else. I think that part of that is getting way ahead. So when you start saying that, now you need the recipes 2 or 3 months in advance,
Well, and
because
Bill-
so you have to
Bill-
think about, but you can't, you need to add anything else like that. You have to push the horizon of events
Yeah.
way away from you to make that work. Go ahead,
And
Steve.
Bill Nye, the science guy, did some of this as well.
Yep.
You have to realize food science in many cases is religious food science. And I know somebody that teaches up at Davis, and they go at it a lot with people coming in from other countries because they teach the chemistry, and these other people want to talk about the yang of the food. It doesn't exist.
Well, it does. And so the thing is that they just don't have a science, they don't have a scientific term for it, but oftentimes we find later that they were right. They just didn't know how to say it in a way that we wanted to hear it. So, they call it something, and for them, that's a technical term. And science, oftentimes our science is catching up with what they've been doing for a couple thousand years, and so we just don't have any language for it yet. But I think that Good Eats is a guy, I would say Good Eats is a good place to look at too. I mean, I watch those over and over again because that's like one of my ways that I look at for training is, I would have loved to take what Alton Brown did and put it into CG, like to explain some of the stuff that he does very mechanically with nets and things and everything else. But he does that where he breaks away and talks about it. And if you break away and talk about it that way, I think his version of it would actually work better, of cutting to a science person that has like in a stage that's got like, how does that actually work? Well, we've got proteins here like this, and then we start breaking them up, and then they pull them out, and you could cut away to that during a cooking thing where someone's doing something very physical and fun on a stage where there's a scientist that's doing it. And I think that the perfect person to do that would be Kiki Sanford, because Dr. Kiki, because she already we did a show called Food Science with her, and we did CG and everything else. So if you go back and search for Food Science, you'll see our experimentations in that area, in the same area that you're talking about 15 years ago with no budget. Like our budget for if you look at those episodes and you find some of them on YouTube, just remember our budget for CG was $200 per show. So anyway, next question.
Guy Cochran's back with, we see our friend and second hour guest Terry Morgan at 53:52 into the program. Can we discuss the series of user testimonial shots?
I thought they did a pretty good job of making it look like people were looking into a webcam. Ooh, maybe not. So anyway, yeah. So there was a lot of really, really well done of having them look like they were coming into a webcam. Obviously, they were not being shot on a webcam. And so I think that, and they had, crew, I don't know a crew, but at least a person managing all of that. So I thought that was, but the way they lit it, the way they set it up, they're selling that idea, but it's a kind of a hyper real version of that process. Go ahead, Bill.
I don't know. I watched it first because I was busy during the actual presentation on the Apple website, and they did some interesting things there. Number one, they had the LumaFusion logo embedded in the Apple website at that part. I wonder how much that is worth to a company. But also,
we got it. We're almost out of time.
Transitions. Oh, the transitions in the website they're really interesting.
Yep.
So go take a look at some of this content there.
Yep. Next question.
Aaron Hustage of Durham, North Carolina, and he asked, does Apple have an on-site sound stage? I know they built the house in a sound stage a few years ago, but I wasn't sure if it was on-site.
No idea. I would guess yes, because that they have. I know people who have worked on stuff with Apple somewhere. I don't know where. But it's I would imagine they have a soundstage somewhere. Go ahead, Bill.
I don't know whether they have a soundstage per se, but I know that there are incredible numbers of campuses in Cupertino that you don't know are Apple, but that are actually Apple. So it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't have a huge facility somewhere they could easily turn into a soundstage.
Yeah. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I used to work on all the Apple commercials, and we shot them in L.A. on sound stages. But then they got really paranoid about leaks, and they moved a lot of the production back up to Cupertino and built a stage where they did a lot of the small tabletop stuff. But it wasn't a huge sound stage.
Next question.
Andrew Lipnick in San Francisco, did they not add any reverb to the dialogue when in the large virtual rooms? Do we think those shots would have benefited from the addition of a little verb?
Maybe a little, but sometimes I think you get a lot of comments of, wow, it sounds like they're working too hard. From people, Mickey.
Yeah, and the speeches that were done in the actual Steve Jobs theater, where it's glass all around, I could hear reverb reduction trying to do its job. So they were trying to get a reverb in some places, but yeah, I agree. Maybe a hint of it in the drier locations would have helped.
Next question.
Abe of San Diego says, do you know if the production was internal or did they hire an outside production company?
I don't know for Apple, but for most events like this, it's a mixture. So you have a lot of the core folks and even some of the effects folks and editing and everything else that's all internal. And then you have some of the stuff is handed off. Go ahead, Bill.
I just think since they've committed to this process and they're going to keep doing it, it wouldn't surprise me if they were building and adding to a team constantly of in-house people and just continuing to spend money on this is the way of the future.
Yeah, for corporations, we see oftentimes there's an oscillation that happens, that it goes back and forth and back and forth. You just saw this with Blizzard, where they decided to pull everything in-house, and then COVID hit. Now they're carrying all these people in-house and not doing as many events. So then they let them all go. Oh, we should go back to freelance. The advantage that you have with freelance is that you can hand pick the right person for every shot or every shoot or every piece of what you're doing, rather than just who you have on staff in-house. So there's that advantage. The advantage of having them in-house is that there's consistency, there's a culture, and there's also secrecy. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and I think because the secrecy, the NDAs with Apple are some of the strictest ones I've ever had to sign. You show up on set and there's a 33-page NDA you have to sign, that says you can't even mention the fact that you're working on an Apple commercial.
Yeah. Or ever
worked
the
content. And that's why they moved. And so I think on the newer stuff, they will bring in a DP and a director, and they'll try and keep the crew to the minimum and keep a lot of it as Apple employees if they can, if they're dealing with any kind of new release hardware. If it's anything that's still secreted under NDA, they'll try and keep it mostly in-house.
Yeah. Next question.
And the final one we have today, Greg Yotes of Gridley, Kansas, says, do you think there were any new unreleased hardware used in the making of the Apple event?
I doubt it. I didn't see anything there that would have required that. I mean, maybe they were experimenting with a lot of things. I think with a lot of things that we work with, there's a lot of experimentation on a lot of keynotes that I've worked on. There's an enormous amount of, the keynote creates a context where there's an enormous amount of experimentation, but usually that experimentation is looking at the next keynote or the keynote after that, not the keynote that you're in. The keynote that you're in, you're using the most stable things. I mean, there's a lot of money, there's a lot of crews, there's a lot of things. And so you tend not to experiment with the keynote that you're using. Now you might experiment a little bit more with post-production version, but then you're constantly, when you're on stage or when you're shooting, there's all kinds of vendors, especially if you're a company really large, that will just give you a bunch of hardware to play with for the next week or two or a month, because your crews are all there. Oh, let's play with a new camera, a new lens, a new sensor, a new arm, all those things are things that happen pretty constantly. Go ahead, Bill.
I believe there was something amazing in Tim Cook's main assistant's satchel. Just what he gets to play with that nobody else gets to see. Yeah, that's where the cool stuff is.
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey, and then Aaron.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised though, like if maybe in post-production or in any other of the assets creation that they may be doing in-house, that they might be using machines that may have not been announced yet, but for any outside vendors, anything that would be visible to outside vendors, definitely not.
Yeah, go ahead, Aaron, and then Courtney.
I was going to say that the best example of them experimenting, especially with Keynote, is Keynote, the Keynote program itself was run by Steve Jobs in parallel to his original slides for 3 years before they released it. So, you know, I mean, they're doing stuff all the time in the background. You just never see it until it's ready.
Courtney?
Yeah, software is a little bit different than hardware, but you know, you got to realize that these things are produced in advance, and a lot of time the hardware isn't even available at the time they shoot this stuff, and they're using just mock-ups or CG. Now they're using just CGI models of stuff instead of the real hardware. So I don't think there's a lot of the hardware that's even available to use on the shoot because it doesn't really exist yet.
And the nice thing about it being post-production is that's a lot easier to do and to plan it out. All right, well, that was fun. It was a good time talking through it. I think that we'll see if it's if we think the next one is worth spending a whole hour on later. But it should be interesting. WWC should be a lot of fun. I think that's the next one we expect. I don't think we expect anything in May. So we'll take a look at that one and see how it turns out. Great work. Really large number of viewers here today. So welcome to everybody who's coming. If you're new or have been here for a while. We're now going to the post show. If you're wondering what that is, I'm only guessing because the viewership was so high. We had a lot of new people. In the bottom of your email, you'll be able to see a link to how to get to the post show, which is where we're going to go now. So great job for the panelists. Great answers. I think we're really picking up pace and staying on target for the most part, and really tightening the show a lot. And I think it's great. So great work on there, and great, again, to our producers. Thanks for all the questions and the votes, keeping us online. All right, jump into the post show. See you all tomorrow.